This morning we are going to start our reading in Romans chapter 3, verse 23. We are going to go to one of the more important verses in the Bible in terms of understanding worldview, understanding the human experience on earth, and in some cases, this verse explains so much of the calamity and the brokenness in our world and our culture. Romans chapter 3, verse 23. Paul writing now to the church in Rome, and he says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." For all have sinned. Now, I want to follow up with that by saying we're not here today to focus on sin or to magnify sin, because we celebrate today a God who has covered our sin, forgiven us of our sin, and now, today sin doesn't show who we are. Acceptance does and forgiveness does. But the Bible, it declares that everyone has sinned. Well, how do we define sin? Well, sin, it can't be defined by you or by me, or else it would lack foundation. It would lack clarity. If you said something is wrong and I say it's right, well then who says it's right or wrong? But of course, God says. God in His Word has set the mark. And to sin means to miss His mark. His mark has been set. It's perfect. It's flawless. His law, it's perfect. And to sin means to miss His mark, to miss His standard. And then Paul, he goes on, he says, we've sinned and we've fallen short of the glory of God. Now when you see the word glory throughout the New Testament narrative, glory, it kind of speaks of the presence of God, or more specifically, relationship with God. So Paul, he's literally saying to the church in Rome here, he says, we've all sinned, we've all missed God's mark, and we've all missed the requirements to befriend God, to be close with God. We're far from His presence, His friendship, His glory. We're far from it. It becomes abundantly clear in this one verse here that there is a gaping canyon or a gap between us and God. And that has always been such a big image in my life. I remember as a middle schooler, my young life leaders, explaining sin, saying, imagine that there's the gap between you and God. You're on one side, He's on the other, and unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to bridge the gap. You can't earn it. You can't win it. We don't deserve it. And yet, today, we celebrate a gap that has been bridged. And so this morning, I want to talk about where's the power? Where's the power here? Because Romans, it clearly states, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I mean, listen to what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2. He's describing the state that we were in. He says, and you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath like the rest of mankind. Whoa, Paul, geez. Give us a break. Dead to God? Following the current cultural trends, the devil has sway in our life and our thoughts. I mean, living by instinct and impulse, and we're under the wrath of God. Wow. Now you're probably thinking, okay, Casey, where are you going with this? Well, I want to lay the foundation of our message today on the reality that this is where we came from. This is where we've come from. Notice what Paul says. You were dead in the trespasses and sins. You were dead. Paul saying this wasn't an improvement plan. This wasn't a remodel. This is death to life. I want to be clear about where we've come from, because I want to talk about a very serious issue that I think every Christian and every person, to that matter, face, and that is pride. We look at where we were, we look at where we've come from, and then we look at where we are now, and our pride wants to tell us that we had something to do with that. Hey, we deserve some of the credit, don't we? The scripture that came to mind was Luke chapter 15, the single most important passage in my personal journey and walk with Jesus. It's a passage that I've read 100 times, but God, he kind of popped something out to me in a new way that I had never really noticed before. Luke chapter 15, verse 20 says, "Now he, the son in the story, arose and came to the Father." Notice this phrase, though. "While he was still a long way off, his father saw him, felt compassion, ran and embraced him and kissed him." When I would read this passage, I would picture, I would envision the father running, just sprinting to the son. And I think that's what we're supposed to picture when we read this. But this last time I read it, all I could picture was the son. No matter how hard he tried, the closest he got to Dad's house, the best he could do, was still a long way off. It's the best he could do. We're going to come back to this verse in a few minutes. But first, for those of you who don't know, I coach freshman football at Malik Terrace High School with my brother Brian. He coaches the offense, I coach the defense. Tony, he was our head coach, but he was too good, so varsity stole him away, which we were kind of bummed about. But we're having a good time. We're having a blast coaching these guys. Our team is 6-0. I mean, holla at your boy, 6-0. And check out this for a stat line. Just check this out. We have scored 184 points and have only given up 26. Right? Oh, yeah. And I mean, like I said, I coach the defense, so I take a lot of pride in that stat. So anyways, after a win, what we like to do is we like to reward the boys with a fun practice. Let them have some fun. They worked hard, give them a break. We like to play ultimate football, same as ultimate frisbee, but use a football. And I grew up playing sports, and I had a pretty successful football and track career. And so I like to lace up the cleats and play with the guys and show them what I got. Or more honestly, I like to show them how much better I am than they are. And so, I'll divide up the teams evenly, and I always make sure that I'm on the opposite team of our best player. Try to make it as fair as I can. And, to make a long story short, did we win? No, we killed them. It was like 6-2. I threw 3 touchdowns, caught another one, no big deal. But that one player who I always make sure is on the opposite team, he ended up, they scored 2 points. The one of his, though, happened to be in the area of the field that I was defending. And, so although we won 6-2, this one player, he has the gall and the nerve after the game to say, "Yeah, but I beat Coach Casey." Like, you serious? And so I'm looking at this 14-year-old, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what would a good coach do? In this situation, what would a good coach do? A good coach would probably be like, "Yeah, man, you guys, a few more of those, you guys would have had us, man. That was a great catch." But I chose to go more the path of a lesson in humility. They needed some of that. I looked back at him and I said, "Are you serious, bro? Are you serious? You honestly think that you beat me? Are you for real?" I said, "It wasn't even close. We won 6-2, 4 of which of those I scored." I said, "It wasn't even close, man." And you're probably thinking, "Casey, that's horrible." It's not horrible, because they need to know that I am better than them. That's good coaching. Not even close. Now, we laugh because this player was delusional in this one part of his life. But this delusion, it reminds me of my own, or maybe even yours, when it comes to relationship with God. This delusion that tells us if we work hard enough or try hard enough that we can make up for our error and our wrong and our sin. We can improve ourselves to the point where we can earn the relationship of God. We can earn friendship with God. We can earn back the glory of God, but we're not even close. It reminds me of Luke 15. We just read it. after all this young man's preparations to return to the good graces of his father, he's returning from a distant land where he spent all of his money in reckless living. He's alone. He has no friends. Pig food started looking good to him. He's making his plans. He prepares his speech. And I think Jesus, though, as he tells the story, wants it to be very clear that in all of his prepared speeches and navigating his way back to Dad's house, do you know how close he came to getting back to Dad's house? Still a long way off. In other words, not even close. So many of us, we sit here today and we all have gaps. We all have weaknesses. We all have inconsistencies. We all have shortcomings. We all have our gaps. And so I don't think the problem is realizing whether or not we have gaps, but where the problem lies is how we choose to deal with those gaps. In 24 years of living, I have noticed a few common trends when it comes to dealing with our gaps. Two, to be more specific. The first way is we choose to ignore the gap, particularly when it comes to God. We deny the gap, we ignore the gap, we pretend the gap doesn't exist. We don't want to deal with the gap. Or the second way, we become obsessed with our weaknesses and obsessed with our gap. And the agenda of our life and the focus of our life becomes about working on that gap. Here's the million-dollar question. What are you going to do about your gap? Or if you're more like me, it's more plural. What are you going to do about your gaps? What are you going to do with that area of weakness? How are you going to deal with it? How are you going to address it? What's the game plan? What's your process? Are you going to ignore it? Are you going to focus on it? What are you going to do? And here's where things start to get a little tricky, because how we choose to deal with our gap starts to reveal where we believe the power is in closing that gap. Here's what I mean. Maybe you've been a Christian for a while now. You've been through some ups, you've been through some downs. You've had those amazing seasons of life where everything just seems to go great. Honestly, you kind of feel God in everything you're doing. At work, with your friends, in your thoughts, in your free time. Just everything just seems to go great. But you've also experienced those seasons that are quite the opposite. You feel alone, distant, far from God. Maybe you started dabbling in the things the old you used to do. And so naturally, what do? We compare. We start to compare. What was so different about those seasons? What was so different? Well, I had that daily devotion I was doing, and let's be honest, I got really good at praying, and I was giving more money to church, and I was volunteering, and I was talking to people about God, and I am for all of that. But if you're not careful, what starts to happen? I was doing this. I was doing that because of me, because of what I was doing, because of what I did. And it starts to become about you. I'm reading Luke 15, and I'm realizing, man, I've put together some pretty crazy strategies to close my gaps, haven't I, God? I just felt God saying, yeah, it was cute. You had your little speeches and stuff and things you were going to do to earn me and deserve me, but I never got close, did I? No. I was pretty delusional, wasn't I? Yeah, but you meant well. And it dawned on me that so much of my life, so much of my walk with God has been God, you watch, I'm gonna prove this to you. I'm gonna fix this, okay? I'm gonna show you why I'm one of the good guys, why I deserve or earn or you should be proud of me because I'm gonna. What are you gonna do with your gap? Jesus was asked a question by religious leaders, and do you know why they asked him this question? You know why? Because they didn't like the gapped people that Jesus hung out with. Jesus, he hung out with people with gaping gaps. I mean, gaps you can't ignore, gaps you can't pretend are not there. I mean, drug dealers, prostitutes, pimps, financially just backward, embezzling kind of characters. These were Jesus' lunch buddies, okay? And so the pastors and leaders were like, Jesus, you can't hang out with people like this. And he says, let me explain to you why I hang out with people like this. And he tells them 3 stories. The first story is about a shepherd. This shepherd has 100 sheep. He counts his sheep. He only has 99. So he leaves the 99 in an open field. He goes searching for the one. When he finds the one, he takes it, puts it on his shoulders, returns home. When he gets home, he gets all his fellow shepherds together. They have a party, and Jesus says, so there is in heaven a celebration over one sinner who repents than over 99 who need no repentance. He goes to the next story. He says there's a woman. She has a coin collection, 10 coins. She counts her coins. There's only 9. She lost one. She turns her house upside down searching for it. She finally finds it. Who knows how long it takes? She probably could have got a job, probably could have had it, probably had a job, could have earned 2 or 3 more coins in the time it took her to find one. And she finds it and gets everyone in the community and the cul-de-sac together. And it says, I love you, Rebecca. Jesus says, so there's a celebration in heaven when one sinner repents. And the third story, he says, there's a boy. In fact, there's 2 boys, one older and one younger. The younger one wants his inheritance. He takes his inheritance early from his father. He goes and lives recklessly, wildly. He's broke. He's lost. He's depressed. He's at the lowest place possible. He realizes, okay, I'm not family anymore. I'm not accepted anymore. But I wonder if Dad would let me be an employee in his home. Because just being an employee at Dad's house would be better than the pigsty that I find myself in. But as the story goes, the boy is celebrated like he has come home from serving his country in the military. He comes home as if he's done some noble act worthy of honor and party and praise. You look at these stories and you have to ask yourself, who bridges the gap? How big was that gap for the sheep? Like, imagine that sheep out there just like, dang, where'd everybody go? Shoot. Oh, well. Like that sheep never stopped to make a plan. Like sheep, they don't do that. They're dumb. Like sheep don't make plans. Who bridged the gap? The shepherd or the sheep? The shepherd. You can argue the sheep might have not even known it was lost. It was like, ooh, that's a big cliff. Ooh, that looks fun. Right? Who bridged the gap? Shepherd. We go from a clueless sheep, it gets worse. Then we go to a lifeless coin. Who bridges the gap, the woman or the coin? Coins don't do that. Coins don't have a brain. Coins don't know they're lost. Who bridges the gap? The woman. A picture of the Holy Spirit just earnestly searching for, lost people. A coin, as I said, it doesn't know it's lost. There are people in the world who don't even know they're lost, and God still searches them out. They're worth much to him. And he goes on in the story, and the boy, he gets accepted and celebrated. I'm reading this, and I have to step away because it dawns on me that I have been misinterpreting this passage for years. My favorite passage, I've been misinterpreting it. I always thought that the sheep and the coin and the son was a picture of who I was before I got saved. You know what I mean? Like that was me, and that's not me. Like I'm not the sheep, I'm not the coin, I'm not the son. You know what that is? That's my false pride telling me, look at me now. Look at how far I've come. Like, God, do you remember when that was me? Man. I could feel God just giving me this humbling nudge saying, what do you mean used to? What do you mean used to? And I realized, God, I am the sheep. I am the coin. I am the son. Like that's not who I used to be. That's who we are. The only thing that's changed now is because of God, we've been found. Because of God, we've been made alive. Because of God, we've been redeemed. Don't be mistaken. That is where the power is. Because of God. Without him, we are wandering dumb sheep. Without him, we are lifeless as a coin, and without him, we are still a long way off. The day you start to believe that you have made up or earned or deserved anything from God is the scariest day of your life. I'll just be frank. Scariest day of your life. Because that's the day you go from humbled, undeserving, son or daughter to self-righteous, deserving Pharisee. Do you remember the context for why Jesus tells these three stories in the first place? Because the Pharisees and teachers of the law were muttering. Other translations use words like murmuring or grumbling at the fact that Jesus was sitting and eating and hanging out with sinners, because they didn't. They didn't do that. The Pharisees and other leaders, they looked down on the Gentiles. They looked down on sinners. They would avoid them completely from fear of being defiled by their filth, by their sin. They believed that their strict devotion and compliance to the law made them righteous above all their other men. That's what they believed. But now listen to what Jesus has to say in regards to this. This is Luke chapter 18, verse 10. Then Jesus told this story to some who had great confidence in their own righteousness and scorned everyone else. 2 men went to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other was a despised tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed this prayer: I thank you, God, that I am not a sinner like everyone else. For I don't cheat, I don't sin, I don't commit adultery. I'm certainly not like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give you 1/10 of my income. But the tax collector stood at a distance and dared not even lift his eyes to heaven as he prayed. Instead, he beat his chest in sorrow, saying, Oh God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner. I tell you, this sinner, not the Pharisee, returned home justified before God. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. This particular Pharisee in this story, he essentially is tooting his own horn to God. He's so proud of his own goodness, he's so proud of his own righteousness that he didn't even think he needed anything from God at all. I mean, you'll notice in his prayer, if we can call it that, he's not asking for anything. He's not confessing anything. All he wants is God to recognize how awesome he is. That's all he wants. But the tax collector, he showed a completely different attitude. He felt so unworthy. He couldn't even lift his eyes. He wouldn't even look up to heaven. Instead, he beat his chest in sorrow and cried out for mercy. He had nothing to impress God with. No deeds to offer, no righteousness to offer. His hope was in God and God alone. The biggest mistake of the Pharisee is in thinking that he can make himself right with God. But as the story goes, the tax collector is the one justified in the sight of God. Jesus said, this sinner, not the Pharisee, returned home justified before God. The tax collector went down from the temple justified and accepted because he had the kind of attitude that God responds to. And he says he was justified, a word that means cleansed of sin and declared righteous. Friends, what it comes down to is humility. The tax collector, he believed that the only thing that would cleanse him of his sin and of his guilt was grace. He knew it. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, Paul says, For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. This is not your own doing. I think I could stand up here for the next 5 minutes and just say that over and over. This is not your own doing. Your saved soul is not your own doing. He goes on, it is the gift of God. Do you know why your salvation is so great? Because it's how you got it. It is a gift. It is the gift of God. He goes on in verse 9, not a result of works, so that no one may what? Boast. So that no one may boast. Paul is saying, nobody gets to walk in here puffing their chest talking about how I did it. I did it. I was focused. I was disciplined. It wasn't easy, but I did it. You didn't do nothing. You know why salvation is so great? It levels all of humanity. It levels everyone. It is by grace and grace alone. It is the gift of God. And can we all just agree that if anyone ever had the right to boast, if anyone ever deserved to boast, it would be Paul. I mean, planted countless churches. He wrote half of the New Testament, at least. I mean, he deserved to boast if anyone. But then listen to what he says in his second letter to the Corinthians. He's addressing the church toward the end of his letter in regards to these false apostles, these false teachers who are going around slandering his name. They're questioning his authority as an apostle, and they're even questioning his teaching of the gospel. They're questioning him. So, he's torn because he wants to remind them why he's their leader, but at the same time, he refuses to boast. He refuses to take any credit for what he's done. And so he goes and he lists off, hey, just so you know, like, this is my resume, just so you remember. Like, he lists off a few things. But then he goes in chapter 11, verse 30, and says, if I must boast, I would rather boast about the things that show how weak I am. What's Paul doing? He's given all the glory to God, all of it. He deliberately takes, the attention off of himself and puts it on God. Takes it completely off himself, puts it on God. And then he continues on in chapter 12. This one's a little long, bear with me. It's awesome though. This boasting will do no good, but I must go on. I will reluctantly tell about visions and revelations from the Lord. I was caught up to the third heaven 14 years ago. Whether I was in my body or out of my body, I don't know. Only God knows. Yes, only God knows whether I was in my body or outside of my body. But I do know that I was caught up to paradise and heard things so astounding that they cannot be expressed in words, things no human is allowed to tell. That experience is worth boasting about, but I'm not going to do it. I will boast only about my weaknesses. If I wanted to boast, I would be no fool in doing so because I would be telling the truth. But I won't do it because I don't want anyone to give me credit beyond what they can see in my life or hear in my message, even though I have received such wonderful revelations from God. So to keep me from becoming proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me and keep me from becoming proud. 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power my power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Wow. This is such a powerful verse. Paul is saying, everything that I am is weakness, but I've given all of myself to Christ, who is strong. And so in my weakness, I am made strong. But let's start from the beginning because I love Paul here. He starts off chapter 12 by essentially saying, you guys have brought knives to a gunfight. Essentially what he's saying. You brought knives to a gunfight. Like, how is this for just the ultimate one-upper of all time? He's reading this oh, so what are the new people saying about me? Oh, they were pretty convincing? Okay. Oh, they've done what with their life? Oh, that's cool. I've been swept up to the third heaven. And they're reading it like, there's 3 of them? Paul's like, yeah, you guys don't even know. But then he says, but I refuse to brag or even talk about this because I don't want anyone to give me credit. In fact, because I've been given such wonderful revelations, so to keep me from becoming proud or conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan. Paul says, to keep me from becoming proud. Sometimes, as Christians, we have what are often referred to as mountaintop experiences. No doubt Paul just had the Everest of mountaintop experiences, but maybe you've heard of this term or even had one yourself. These are usually very defining moments in a Christian's life. Times when we feel our faith is at its strongest, times when we feel God more than we have ever felt before. Now, if you've had one of these mountaintop experiences, you know that unfortunately we have to come down. And it's for the same reason why Paul was given this thorn in the flesh. Paul says, so to keep me from becoming arrogant or proud. Because of what he has seen, he would have gotten puffed up or proud about it and arrogant. In the same, if we never had to come down from our mountaintop experience, we would we would become puffed up, arrogant, and proud as well. We would forget that we even need God. And so we have to come down, but it's for our own good. This thorn in the flesh was for Paul's own good. Now, we aren't told what Paul's thorn in the flesh was. It's left unclear. And I believe Paul did this for a reason. Divinely inspired, of course, because I think he did it so that me and you, we would read this and not get caught up in what Paul's difficulties was. We wouldn't get caught up comparing our plight and our difficulties to Paul's, but instead we would be able to fill in the blank, so to speak, and relate our lives, our challenges to what is being said here. Maybe your thorn in the flesh might be maybe a sickness, a disease. Maybe it's an injury. Maybe it's an addiction. Maybe it's just your past, and you having to carry that around. Whatever Paul's was, whether physical or mental or spiritual, 3 different times he begged God. He said, God, take it away. Take all my weakness away. Take all my gaps away. Make them disappear. All my propensities, all my challenges, take them away, God. And Paul says, God wouldn't take it away. In fact, he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. Other translations say, my power is perfected in weakness. God is saying, where you are gapped, where you are weak, I am strong, and the power of Christ rests on you. In my gap, he is strong. Now, what are you going to do about your gap? What are you going to do? You're going to let it define you and separate you and tell you that's who you are? You're going to ignore it? You're going to obsess over it? Or are you going to use your gap as an opportunity to turn to the only one who can bridge it and worship him and focus on him and accept him in? Paul says, now I glory with what God has done in my gaps. Now I will speak of my gaps, and I will tell you the glory of God that has been revealed in my weaknesses and in my shortcomings. Wow. In preparations for this message and just talking about humility and pride and just reflecting on my own life, can I just say, just being up on this stage is the just most humbling, ridiculous thing that God has ever thought up. Okay, it's a conundrum why this works and why I'm up here. I don't understand it, because honestly, the list of reasons why I shouldn't be up here, frankly, it isn't a short one. And I think the same could be said for Paul. And I'm going to bet the same could be said for you. But in our weakness, we are strong. In our gap, God makes us strong. As we prepare to go on with our week, as we continue considering the question, where's the power? The answer is it's very clear, and it's not us. It's very clear. But there is an important role that we play in this, and that's whether or not we accept this. Listen to what it says in James chapter 4. So let God work his will in you. Yell a loud no to the devil and watch him scamper. Say a quiet yes to God, and he'll be there in no time. What did the son have to do? Yes, I'll put the robe on. Yes, I'll put the rings on. What did the coin do? The coin was just possessed. The sheep just said, yes, I'll return to the herd. God, I'm so embarrassed. I've done it again. I can't believe what I've done. I'm so far from where you are. What does God require? Yes. And here he comes. Listen to the language, and he will be there in no time. I pray today that you can see Almighty God flawless, just flawless beyond compare in his brilliant beauty, just running towards you in compassion and forgiveness. Why? Why? To reward you for what? For what he has done, not for what you have done. That is the power of God unto salvation.